Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top lane tier list for patch 8.6. So this is the patch that the new Keystone Conqueror came out on, so it has kind of shifted the top lane meta a little bit for this patch, and there's a few picks that did definitely rise up due to the Keystone introduction. So that being said guys, let's get started. So for tier 1 in this patch, to start it off here, the first champion is going to be Kled. Now Kled's moving up into tier 1 for this patch due to the Conqueror Keystone. Conqueror synergy with Kled is really good right now, and it's performing super good on him. It's performing way better than Electrocute or Press the Attack on Kled. You go in with Kled with your Q. If you have your W up, the amount of attack speed you get from that and the amount of true damage autos you're going to be able to get off is really good. So it just allows Kled to trade super good in the early game whenever it's up. And then I like to think of Kled in this patch as basically the bruiser version of Sion. If you don't need a tank on your team, then Kled can fill the role that Sion does super good. He has the ability to have a strong early game like Sion, and he also has the ability to not only win his lane, but with his ultimate, he has the ability to roam around the map and just help his other lanes win as well. And then for your runes on your Kled top for this patch, obviously take the Conqueror there. And as for your secondary runes, it is kind of changing up a little bit in this patch for these bruiser top laners. Most are performing best right now with the Bone Plating as well as the new rune there. I'm pretty sure it's called Chrysalis if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but those two, that combination of those two runes there as your secondary are doing very well in 8.6. The second champion in the tier 1s for this patch is going to be Darius. So very similar to Kled, Darius is also doing great with the new Conqueror Keystone. He is still doing well with Phase Rush too, so I think more so for Darius, it does depend on the matchup and what the enemy team comp has as to which you would want to run. If you feel like you need that sticking power and it's going to be hard to get onto your opponents, then Phase Rush is still a good option. But if you're in a lane to where you just think you can snowball super hard and you don't really need that bonus movement speed from Phase Rush, then Conqueror is going to be a great option as well. Darius is basically just the premier bruiser top laner for 8.6. He rarely loses lane to any melee top lane champions, especially against tanks. He can just destroy those matchups. The only matchups he does struggle with a little bit are against some range picks like Swain and Teemo, but if you are having trouble in those matchups, you can just look to ban one of them out and just hope that they don't pick the other. But overall, he's just a pretty safe blind pick in this patch. If you can get ahead with Darius, then your ability to pressure in the side lane and just have 1v2 potential is really good, and you can just look to solo carry with this pick in 8.6. So a staple in the tier 1 now for the past few patches has been Sion. Sion did receive a few nerfs and he isn't as strong as he was a few patches ago, but he is still strong enough to stay in tier 1. Sion is your best tank for 8.6, so if you're lacking a tank on your team, if you just have like a full squishy team comp in your last pick, then I would definitely recommend investing into Sion. Look to add him to your champion pool and pick him up if you do need a tank on your team. Sion still has the ability to have a very good laning phase. You're still going to want to be running the Comet on him with the Scorch and then go for that Emax, and in pretty much every single melee matchup besides like Darius, you are going to be able to just poke the enemy really well in the laning phase with that E. He does a great job as well against a lot of these champions that want to try to poke you in the laning phase, so he's a great pick against someone like Pantheon. He's even a pretty good pick against Teemo because he does have the ability to negate a lot of their damage whenever his W is active, and he can just poke those champions out really well in the laning phase with his E. There's not too much more to say about Sion. He's been a great pick for the past few patches now. His kit is just overall very good for solo queue, and he has the ability to not only win his lane, but like Kled, he has the ability there with his ultimate to influence other lanes and just help his team out really well in the early to mid game. And then holding on to a tier 1 spot for yet another patch here is Camille. So in my opinion, Camille is still one of the best bruiser top laners. Her ability to solo carry a game, even if your team ends up feeding in the early game, is really good because if you get ahead with Camille, you have the ability to just easily lock down whichever target you want to in a team fight and burst them out super easily. Your E and your ultimate just give you a lot of backline access. So if you know how to play Camille well, well and you can play her at her highest level, I would say that she's even probably a little bit better than Darius or Kled, just because of her ability to really deal with those Fed champions on the enemy team in a team fight, and she's not as easily kited as a lot of these other bruiser picks. For your keystone option on Camille in this patch, it is very situational. If you are in a winning matchup and you think that you can poke well in the laning phase, then I would still run Comet. If you're in a tank matchup though, and you want that true damage from the Conquer keystone, then I would be running that. It just kind of does depend on your matchup for 8.6 as to which keystone you want to run. And then lastly here, to round out the tier 1s for this patch is going to be Swain. So Swain has been a pretty good pick now for the past few patches. He got those buffs, I think it was last patch, that kind of tipped him over the top. He is now one of the strongest picks in both the top lane and in the mid lane. He pretty much wins all melee matchups right now. He's a pick that can do well against a lot of these highest pick top laners too. He can do well against Darius, he can do pretty well against Sion, so he's overall just got pretty good matchups in this patch, and he is one of the better blind pick top laners. The fact that his Q is on such a short cooldown now, it's on a 5-second cooldown at level 1, and then when you get it maxed out, it's on a 2.5-second cooldown, so in melee matchups especially, it's very easy for Swain to bully that lane, and he can just really look to get the advantage in the laning phase and start zoning the enemy melee champion from CS. Swain's also a great pick for solo queue because once you do reach the mid to late game, you don't even need to build like any tank items really on Swain, but you can still soak a ton of damage in team fights while also being able to deal a ton of damage. So he's just overall a really good team fight pick, and he's just a very consistent pick for solo queue because of that. Now for your runes on Swain, some people are taking Phase Rush and some people are taking Airy. I think it does come down to personal preference and also what the enemy team comp consists of. If you really want to try to snowball the early game and you're going to be able to poke a lot, then I would go Airy. But if the enemy team comp does have quite a bit of crowd control and they also have the ability to kite you, then taking Phase Rush and just being able to have more resistance to slows and just staying more mobile in team fights is going to be the better option. Now for this patch for top lane, I'm adding in a tier 1.5 here, which is basically like an S- tier, so just a little bit off of tier 1. I think that Kayle and Quinn for this patch are two picks that you should really be looking out for. Quinn did end up getting a lot of bug fixes in this patch, which has really helped her out a lot. And then Kayle with the new Conquer keystone is actually doing very well. She also is doing great with a Ginsu's Rush in this patch. It's actually doing better on Kayle now after the changes. So I think that these two picks right now, they're definitely not played very much in this patch, but they are two picks that are performing very well and you should look out for in 8.6. And then as for Gangplank, I still think he is a great top lane pick. He is a little bit more exploitable now in the early game, but if you can still play him to a high level, then I feel like he does have the potential to still be a tier 1 top lane pick. He's just a very strong team fight mid to late game top laner, so as long as you don't end up inting in the early game as Gangplank, then you're always going to have some great success on him. So for tier 2 in this patch, a lot of these picks here have been tier 2 for the past few patches now. A few that I want to take a look at in this patch, the first one is Olaf. Now Olaf with Conquer is actually doing great in 8.6. It is performing better than Comet on him, and I think the reason for it is because you just have the ability to have a super good all-in, like a level 2 all-in or even a level 1 all-in as Olaf, and that Conquer just gives you a ton of true damage and just a ton of damage overall. So if you're looking for a new like bruiser top laner to pick up in this patch, then Conquer on Olaf is doing very well so far. And then as for some other picks here that are also doing well with Conquer in this patch, you've got your Yasuo, Tryndamere, Riven, Renekton, Jax, Aatrox, Aurelia. They're all doing very well with Conquer. One pick that you'd kind of expect to do well with it, but is not, is Fiora. Fiora is actually still performing well with Klepto in 8.6. Her synergy with Klepto is just too good to pass up on right now. Her ability to proc it very easily in the early game and just generate a lot of resources is really good, so she is still performing better with that in 8.6. And then for the tier 3 champions in this patch, a lot of these picks consist of just champions that don't have the best matchups in 8.6 or picks that just aren't really good to carry solo queue with. So a lot of these tank top laners here like Gragas, Galio, Nautilus, Ornn, they're just not really good in this patch because they don't have very strong matchups. They're not blind pickable, and if you're looking for a tank, then Sion or Maokai are just going to be a lot more consistent than them in 8.6. So that is going to be all for the top lane tier list for patch 8.6. This patch is definitely a pretty interesting one. I think that you can play a lot of different things right now in the top lane. The new Conquer Keystone is definitely one to experiment with in this patch, and I feel like this is definitely a patch where you should be able to just play a lot of things to some great success due to the new Conquer Keystone. So that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.